Hello, my name is Dr. David Edward-Ooi Poon, founder of Faces of Advocacy, or Advocacy for Family Reunification at the Canadian border. Our guest today at the Faces of Advocacy Champion Interviews is the Honourable Michelle Rempel Garner, who has been an incredible advocate for family reunification in Canada. I want to very much thank her for being here, and I want to make sure all of you know how she's been a champion for us. So welcome to the show, and thanks very much for your time. Most important, how is family reunification important to Canadians and the people of Calgary-Nose?
Well, Canada is a pluralism, and the reality of our nation is that immigration is a very strong part of it, and we fall in love with people from other countries, and we have family members who live in other countries, and that's true for so many Canadians. So of course, the pandemic was going to present unique challenges to our country because it has complicated the issue of family reunification. And frankly, this is something I hear in my riding every day. It's a source of casework, and it's something that the government, after 6 months, and many other countries figuring out best practice with this regard, needs to develop a plan and give some certainty out of compassion for I would say it's hundreds of thousands of Canadians who are affected by this situation.
Absolutely. The compassionate aspect is a huge part that seems to be missing from the discussion. Now, for people just joining us on the campaign, Honourable Rempel Garner was one of the 6 nonpartisan MPs who stood with us at our press conference on Parliament Hill on August the 12th, 2020. So, Michelle, what led you to stand at our press conference and publicly support family reunification?
Well, certainly, I have received many emails and phone calls in my office from constituents who find themselves in this situation, either separated from spouses or other family members, and their concerns aren't being heard from the government right now. And as a member of Parliament, my role in these situations is to try and find a path to resolve the situation. As a member of the opposition and as a prominent one, it's important for me to put pressure on the government so that they understand that this isn't something that can just be swept under the rug. And it's been many months. There needs to be a plan. And again, like just reemphasizing that compassionate angle. There are so many heartbreaking scenarios, and right now there's no hope that is being expressed by the government, or frankly, even understanding. So it's just, first of all, it's my job. But second of all, this is an issue that there's really no reason why it can't come to resolution. All it takes is political will and some smart planning from the government. And it's my job to pressure them to do that.
You standing with us with your prominence and your name recognition meant the world to us on the campaign, to the team, and to me personally. So I really thank you for that, Michelle. In regards to what you've been hearing
You did a great job.
I'm not so sure about that. I could have maybe got a better shirt. Because of everything you hear from the constituents of Calgary-Nose and the rest of Canada, how has mental health been affected?
Oh, it's tough, isn't it, being separated from a loved one? At a time when many people have lost their jobs, you're going through periods of isolation, uncertainty, the world has changed. You want to be with your family. That's who you want to draw strength from and rely upon. And that has a huge impact on mental health. Even just if you narrowed it down to the uncertainty of not knowing when you're going to be reunited. I mean, I think a lot of people could get through this if they just had a plan, right? Or some sort of timeline that they could be working towards, or rationale as to why we haven't seen this. And it's going to have a huge impact on mental health. And, just adding to my previous answer and building into this, I don't think that the government understands this issue, mental health. I also don't think that there's several other things they're taking into consideration. Many people can't afford to take 2 weeks off of work to quarantine, plus the time to travel month after month. Like it's classist to think otherwise. Members of the LGBT community might not be married. If you fall in love with somebody in a different country, it takes a long time to figure out how to get married. And you might have careers in separate countries. So being married, like the whole definition of spouse. You know, people that are in co-parenting relationships where they've got, you know, let's say you're engaged to somebody, you have a stepchild, your partner might not be able to travel because they can't take their kid with them for that period of time, or there's school, like there's so many factors that lead towards compassion that the mental health aspect is but one. But I feel like the government not having a plan on this actually exacerbates those challenges, that loneliness or that hopelessness, because it's just, I think a lot of people feel like they're not being heard. And I guess what I would say is you are being heard, and across party lines, and we're here to fight to make sure that people like Bill Blair and Justin Trudeau understand that it's not good enough just to say, oh, we're going to send this for another month without any real plan to address this issue.
Just today, the international non-U.S. border restriction, travel restriction, was extended by a month once again on the 11th hour, so today on August the 31st. So a timetable would be incredibly beneficial and helpful to our mental health. I can see that right now. So what can be done today to help families be reunited?
Well, first of all, I think what I've heard a lot in my office is clarity around the quarantine provision for people that are coming in. If there's something in the existing order in council that says if somebody's permitted to enter Canada and they can leave quarantine before the 14 days, essentially if their next stop is the airport. There's actually a line in the order in council that speaks to that. But then there's another confusing line at the end that says if you're not able to comply with the quarantine requirements, you might be barred entry. So that you've got two sort of conflicting statements within the order in council that the government hasn't provided any information on. Even as a member of parliament, I've asked Health Canada and Public Safety to clarify this. The problem is that parliament is prorogued, so I can't get up in the House. There's the tools that I normally would have as a parliamentarian to ask on that issue, which would, I think, solve this question for a lot of people. The government needs to provide clarity on that. What do they mean? The second thing is, I feel very strongly that the government immediately needs to change the definition of spouse with regard to family reunification. That can happen today. There's no reason why the government can come up with exemptions for the spouses of NFL players who aren't married, yet not figure it out for everyone else.
Yes.
I know that people who are asking for this change in definition don't want, like they're perfectly willing to be compliant with all of the rules, but what they're not willing to be is discriminated against because of the realities of country to country relationships that have prevented them from being married. And it's also very paternalistic to assume that everybody can comply with a very narrow view of relationships. If you're a gay man and your spouse is from a country where being outed or being married is either illegal or going to be punished, you're not going to have a marriage certificate. What are we doing for those people that are affected there? What about the reality of partners who are in long-term relationships but have children that have prevented them from immigrating one country to the other, or jobs? But that doesn't make their relationship any less valid or less committed than somebody who has a piece of paper. And the government should change that right away. And the last thing that I feel the government should do is really talk about is to keep Canadians safe and healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19. Nobody's saying that we shouldn't do that. But there are other jurisdictions around the world that are at least studying the possibility of augmenting quarantine requirements with pre and or post-arrival testing that could be done at the person's own expense. I know that that's something that we're hearing many Canadians who are in this situation where they're separated from families ask, and the government could commit today to at least studying the issue, again, giving hope to people. I think that's low-hanging fruit. But I guess, what I would underscore is always a problem. It would be nice for the government. It would be nice for Bill Blair to say, I get to see my wife every day. I'd like you to have the same ability. I empathize with you. I'd love to say that.
Yes, a little bit of compassion would go a long way, particularly when NHL players have a very, very good quarantine plan, and we're asking for a very, very good quarantine plan too. The audio might have cut out in the first sentence for when you were talking about the third thing that you were describing. Could you once again, I'm so sorry, give the topic sentence of the third point that you were giving?
Just how looking at ways to study how we can augment our quarantine requirements,
Yes.
looking at best practice that other countries are examining, for example, the possibility of using pre and post arrival
Yes.
COVID screening that would be done at the traveler's own expense, so that the quarantine period could be augmented by testing, so that people who can't afford, or the reality is they can't be gone for 3 weeks at a time
Mm.
out of the month, might have some hope that
Yes.
there's ways to keep people safe from the spread of COVID-19, but also acknowledge the reality that hundreds of thousands of Canadians find themselves in.
Yes. A feasibility study into it just to at least take a look and do the due diligence.
Exactly.
So you have been our champion, Michelle, a very strong champion. Now, many Canadians have felt unheard by the government officials, but you have been sympathetic, you've been understanding. So I'm wondering, how have you come to understand our plight so sincerely, compassionately, and empathetically?
Well, I'm one of you. I have been hesitant to talk about this because I'm a public figure, and um, my family has not made the choice to be public. So I'm very careful and guarded about talking about my family, but I didn't choose to fall in love with an American. It kind of just happened. We, I never, that's something I didn't foresee in my life. I'm so glad it did. I'm so blessed. Um, but I mean, without going, first of all, I want to be very clear. I'm not advocating for this out of a sense of personal entitlement. I've been very quiet on it because I don't want my support to be misconstrued this way. The reality is I get this as a case issue in my office, and I need to advocate for this on behalf of my constituents. That doesn't stop me from empathizing from this in a very personal way.
Mhm.
It's very difficult to be separated. It's very hard on me to be separated from my husband. It's really hard, but and people are like, at least we're married. We have the ability, but I can't travel back and forth because of my job. I'm sorry. And our family situation, without getting into it, there are many, many factors that prevent my husband from traveling to Canada. And the reality is I don't know when I'm going to see him again. And I check my privilege. I check my privilege in that I've had the ability to see him. I've had the ability to work remotely, but not knowing when I'm going to see him again is hard. And at least, I don't know. I just really hope that the government understands that this is something that so many Canadians are quietly struggling with, that I think that a lot of people just feel not heard. And I think that that's the first thing that this government should do, is say, we're all in agreement. We have to stop the spread of COVID-19. We
Mm.
want Canadians to be safe. Nobody is arguing that. We are not arguing for open borders. In fact, my party, we were the first ones to say we need to put border controls in place at the start of the pandemic. But it's been 6 months. The government should have a plan beyond don't see your family. That's not acceptable. And that's what I would ask the government for.
Personally, thank you, Michelle, for being honest and genuine with your answer there. I speak to you on behalf of the group and to you as a person, that many of us share your sentiment and share that pain. When it comes to the question about, are we doing this for our own reasons? I myself don't have an adult child that we're fighting for. The campaign is to bring families together. Some of us may see our partners, some of us may not after we get our exemptions, but we empathize with you. Thank you very much for showing us that part of
Yeah,
yourself
I
here.
miss my kids. I miss my stepkids.
Yeah.
I miss my mother-in-law. I miss them a lot. It's hard. I miss my hey dad. I miss I you know
It boils
I
down
get it.
to if family is essential, and that's what we're saying here. Um, for our last question, what message do you have for Canadians who are separated from their foreign national family members?
Look, I am optimistic because this government is going to have to address this issue. It's not, you can't look at our issue or this issue in a vacuum. There's, the travel and tourism industry is suffering because the government doesn't have a plan to deal with some of the questions that you just raised. So it's a different context, but it's all the same problem. The economy is suffering because of this. People have lost their jobs. And there are jurisdictions around the world who are taking this seriously. They're looking at feasibility studies. They're they're not jumping to conclusions, but what I would just say is that I also want to thank members of the community for, trust me, not wanting to put your family out there or yourself out there. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But sharing those stories and putting pressure on the government is going to make them have to move. So I would just say this, when you're writing MPs, when you are raising this issue on Facebook groups, when you're calling, your local newspaper and say you need to run with this story, it moves the needle. And unfortunately, you probably didn't plan this in 2020. You are now learning how to lobby the government. You are all lobbyists. And we can move public policy. We just have to be consistent, and we have to speak to Canadians who might be concerned about this. And I guess what I want to say to you, Dr. Poon, is that presenting this in such a rational way, which is we care about public health. We're not asking for special exemptions. We're not asking for anything that wouldn't apply to any other Canadian. And I want to do my part. Everybody wants to do their part to keep Canadians safe, but we can do better. I think that's a message that is going to resonate. And I ask everybody to continue with their efforts, and we'll continue to fight for you.
Honourable Michelle Rempel, please call me David. And thank you so much for your support and for giving the hope to many of us in the campaign and many of us in Canada. Once again, if you are feeling alone, disenfranchised, or forgotten by the government, I ask you to join us in the campaign at facesofadvocacy.com. You can also find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube now at Faces of Advocacy. We are not asking for open borders. We are just asking to be together. Please send your thanks to the Honourable Michelle Rempel of Calgary-Nose. And otherwise, thank you so much. We're logging off in 3, 2, 1.